Luke Hanson McDonald here. Today's interview is with Anthony Broccolini. He's the third-generation CEO of his family business, one of Canada's largest developers of real estate. Based in Montreal, Broccolini is known for their expertise in residential, industrial, and commercial real estate. Their projects span from building millions of square feet for Amazon's distribution network to building beautiful skyscrapers such as L'Avenue, which is nearly 600,000 square feet of space in downtown Montreal. Anthony shares the incredible story of his grandfather, who immigrated from Italy to Canada as a young boy without his parents in the 1940s. He also shares his view of emerging technologies like AI and the role they may play in his family business going forward. Last, he shares why for the first time in decades, his family is moving away from building condos in favor of building apartment buildings due to macro-environmental factors in Canada. You're not going to want to miss this one. This is Beyond the Family Business Podcast. Let's jump into it. Who are you, where you're from, and what do you do?
So, Anthony Broccolini. I'm from Montreal, Quebec. Grew up there. And today run our family business along some other family members and some great talented people.
Awesome. And what is your family business?
So we're in real estate and construction. So we started, my grandfather started in 1949. So he immigrated to Canada when he was 7 and started a home building business in his mid-20s. And so basically building and selling a house. And he did that for the majority of his career. And then had 4 boys, and all the boys came into the business in the early 80s. So a nice evolution from there, and so really went from being a home builder to, when the boys came in, really being a general contractor. And I would say maybe 25 or 30 years ago, we got into real estate development as well. And so today we're really investment manager with private family capital. We're development manager and a builder and a property manager. So really that's the platform today of Broccolini, is really invest, develop, and build.
Wow. Very cool story. And so you're in the third generation then?
Yes.
And your grandfather was Donato?
Yes.
Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
And so what was his entrepreneurial journey? You just quickly touched on it, but how did he get into home building? Why did he do that? Was he a contractor himself, or?
So, certainly from very humble beginnings, coming over like many immigrants did in those times, very, very humble beginnings. He came over with his brother. He was 7. I think his brother was 13 or something. Wow. Came over together. So we both have kids. So imagine saying, okay, get on a boat and,
Oh, without their parents.
Without the parents.
Holy, that's crazy. Wow.
So, so he did a lot of different type of jobs and stuff like that, and was working with the city of Montreal. Was digging trenches, stuff like that, and finally went to school and learned construction, and ended up building his first home, and I think that first home sold for $16,000.
Wow. So very similar home prices to now.
Yeah. Can put things in perspective, right?
Wow. And that was in Montreal?
That was in Montreal, yeah.
Very cool. And where in Italy is your family originally from?
Just south of Rome, so in the Abruzzi region. And
beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you get back there at all?
I do. So actually I have my sister, one of my sisters moved back there maybe 15 years ago, and so she's in Milan. So yeah, nice to go back. We get to go back pretty much every year. And
yeah. Or is the family in Canada a little envious of, the quality of life in Italy? It seems like it's probably the best place in the world to live.
I can tell you, I certainly am.
Yeah.
She has 4 kids now, and but still the amount of traveling that, you can do there. You can go to Switzerland, go skiing. Oh, yeah. You can be at the beach.
Yeah.
You can almost do that all in the same day, right? And so yeah, lifestyle, like, they do it really well there, and super fortunate to have everything so close.
Yeah, no, I love it there. So definitely me and my wife's favorite place to go. So that's a high level of your grandfather's story, and so he started in home building, and that scaled presumably into, did he, build a business with a full construction team, or was he the developer, or what part of it did he really play?
He sort of did everything from A to Z. And for his entire career, his office was in, the basement of the house, the family home. My grandmother was there. My grandmother was an amazing cook. And so he would have folks over, whether it was a client or a sub-trade, he'd have them over for lunch. My grandmother would cook up a storm. So it was a very small business. So in one sense, he was the founder, and, we've been in business for 75 years. So a wonderful foundation, but, it's almost like, the second generation started a whole different business, right? And being a general contractor from being a home builder, a lot of the principles and working on a job site, very similar, but also a dramatically different business, right? So definitely evolved it and scaled it, in a very different way.
And so all 4 of his kids joined the family business.
Yeah.
And what was their story like? Did they grow up in the business, presumably, and sort of just slowly take it over from him, or how'd that go?
They all grew up in the business at a very, very young age. My grandfather, being 4 boys, you can think of, 4 rambunctious boys. Basically, they'd get kicked out of the house on the Saturday, and my grandfather would bring them to job sites. And so, you can speak to my dad and uncles, and, they have fond memories of being, early on job sites and picking up nails, picking up, the cans of Coke and getting a cent for them. And, they collected enough and they'd go buy more Coke and then, come back and sell it to the workers on the job site. So, certainly a very entrepreneurial, spirit from a young age, and great exposure, right? And I think when you talk and think about family business, getting that exposure, I think is super key. And I know there's a lot of the governing thought process of family business, and studied a lot about it, and is really go out and get external experience, right? And I know for them they didn't, neither did I,
but it worked.
It certainly worked, right? And
the one thing I've seen is that no 2 family businesses are the same, and I feel like there's a lot of cliches about like what you should do, but it's incredible to see how there's so many successful family businesses, but like that example of going external versus only working within the business, I see many different machinations, and they all sort of work as long as they work for you as the family, right?
Yes.
That's sort of the most important thing.
Everyone's different. Every personality is different. Every culture is different. Every business dynamic is different, right? So I think at the end of the day, yes, whatever works, whatever works for you, right, is the way to go.
And what was that turning point? You said, your dad's generation, they really took it to the next level. What was that sort of turning point to go from being, what sounds like a fairly humble home builder to being, what you've become today?
Yeah, so I think definitely, a number of different milestones, but, they sort of grew the general contracting business in Montreal. They were doing quite well with that, small to mid-scale, general contractor, doing a lot of industrial, small office buildings. We did, a ton of Canadian Tire stores, nice. Tons of Best Buys, Future Shops. So, we did a lot of different things, a lot of repeat clients, and I guess a couple of turning points. One, we expanded to Ottawa in 2004. So we went there for a residential project, high-rise residential project, that actually never came to fruition, but it was a wonderful lessons learned, and certainly from my personal experience, it was a great, eye-opening experience in terms of understanding the residential market. And so opening up an office in Ottawa was a great experience, but that led us to, I guess, one of our first big real estate deals. And prior we were doing industrial deals. We bought our first big tract of land in Montreal. We did a bunch of design builds, but, typically investing $1 million, $2 million. And then we had this one big deal in Ottawa where it was for TELUS, and it was a much, much bigger investment. We put all of our eggs in one basket, and we ended up getting lucky with it and did well.
What year was that in?
That was 2007. So
okay.
We closed in 2007 before, so we got very, very lucky.
No kidding.
I think it was like a 5 3/4 cap rate, and so yeah, it was a great deal. But what we sort of said, and that was sort of the impetus of us getting into the fund business, and so we said we don't want to put our family in that same position where one, we're just investing all of this into one project. So we started our first limited partnership fund in 2007. So we used a lot of the proceeds that, from that deal and invested into our limited partnership fund, where we basically raised private capital through friends and family in the community, folks that we knew and that we trusted and trusted us. And so I think our first one, we raised $72 million, and we placed that into maybe about a dozen different projects.
And that was like just before the recession.
So we got, so we had a couple of big deals in Ottawa at the time, some big office buildings. So one, like we signed a lease with Export Development Canada at the beginning of the recession, like right before.
That's a good tenant to go through a recession with.
Yes, but even at that, like it's as good of a deal as you can get.
Yeah.
Crown Corporation, and we said, okay, we're going to be okay. But then, the lending environment dramatically changed. And so it was like, okay, all bets are off. And how do we, how do we fix this? And anyways, we were able to weather the storm and, so challenging times. But so the fund business was really, a great springboard for us. Whereas before we were just really general contractor. We added on some, development and, doing some industrial type development and stuff like that. And then the fund business really allowed us to diversify a little bit geographically, but then also within the asset classes. So being an office, being an industrial, and then our first residential deal. And I think another milestone was our first residential project downtown Montreal, L'Avenue. And
wow.
So I had been in the business for maybe 10 years. My cousin Michael joined maybe 3 years prior. And, things were going well. And we were taking all the things that we had learned, from the construction side, but then also we were certainly building the development skill set, and we decided to jump back into residential, and we didn't do it in a small way. We did a 50-story building in front of the Bell Center.
Crazy.
But it was, again, we're super fortunate. We have, amazing folks that have been with us a long time, and we pulled off a great development. I think it's one of Montreal's nicest mixed-use towers.
Absolutely.
And so I think, combination and, I think there's, those were certainly important moments. And I think, one thing in life when you're in it, you don't sort of realize it, right? And now that we're able to look back and say, oh yeah, that was a clear moment over there and that was a clear moment over here, right? And but when you're live in it, it's you just got to go and figure it out and solve for it, right? So
wow. So that's really interesting that you guys got into the fund business prior to 2008. So you had the foresight to actually realize we need to start diversifying our risk here and not just have all of our own money invested in a couple projects. Do you know what the turning point for that thought process was? And the reason why I say that is we have had a similar experience more recently. We've raised our first fund a few years ago for private equity. And I would say it really came from a history of we did have many close calls in the past and realized we need to start doing things more diversified as a family office and doing some co-investments and stuff. So I'd love to hear, what was the motivation?
I would think probably more opportunistic and more, growth mindset, versus risk. And, I think you and I have had this conversation in terms of asset allocation and stuff like that, and we're very focused and very much invested in real estate. And again, like the notion of do you work inside the business or outside the business? There's not necessarily a right or a wrong. I think our philosophy has been, we're really going to put our money where our expertise are and really what we know. So we sort of have inherently, and I don't think it was a byproduct from a conversation in the boardroom saying, hey, let's diversify and all that kind of stuff, or take some risk off the table. But I think the in turn, what sort of happened where it did become sort of a natural way of de-risking things was, we started getting geographically, we were in different areas, right? So we had that geographical diversification. We also had a diversification in terms of asset class. So yes, always real estate, but a little bit of diversification there as well. So I think which has given us definitely more of a blended portfolio today. And certainly where you look at where office is today, right? And
100%. It pays to have that diversification.
We've had ups and downs during those times where back in those days when we first started our fund, like office was our primary, primary breadwinner in that first fund, right? And today it's the majority is industrial, and a couple of years ago, residential was doing really well, right? So it's, they all ebb and flow as, the different food groups within real estate.
Sure. And so you've now been successful since the late 40s. You've done it over multiple generations, which is incredibly difficult, not to mention that you've had multiple people from each generation involved, which adds, a whole other exponential level of complexity. What has been that differentiation, through the generations or that's allowed you to really be successful for so long?
I think, I think for any business, but I think certainly for a family business where it probably has the ability to be more apparent and more alive because the family members, the principals are there, right? And so in terms of, that the culture and the values that have, transitioned over time, and not just with the family members, but again, we have so many people that I consider like my uncles and that, have been with us for so long. So, if you're able to perpetuate those values, like that, I think is sort of the differentiator, right? And so you look at it longer term, we don't necessarily have a time horizon. Our time horizon's always been like we got to do this and pass it on to the next and to the next generation,
sure.
right? And so I think that's probably one of the nice things about a family business is, you typically look at it with a longer outlook,
sure.
Versus, other companies where, we're going to sell it or we're going to exit and stuff like that, where, within a family, you want to keep it together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you've gotten into these different or types of assets as far as office versus industrial versus multi-res. How have you learned those? Do you bring experts in, or did your family learn through trial and error to really, build that knowledge over time?
Definitely learned through trial and error. And certainly over time, we've brought in different experts in. But I think there's no question our greatest success has, been bringing folks in out of school, and they grow within the organization, right? And I think one of the things that we've been good at and want to continue to be great at is, we want to be great at developing and building leaders, right? And in our business, it's, or any business, any team, it's leadership, is really what I think gives you that exponential difference in terms of what you do. And so I think, from a, trial and error perspective, I think we were fortunate where, one, we were general contractors, so the built world we understand very, very, very well and view ourselves as a master builder, and have done a wide range of, projects from soccer stadiums to high-rise residential to, big Amazon facilities and to shopping malls. And so we had a really broad depth of experience on the construction side. And then on the real estate side, what we were really fortunate with, sorry about that.
No worries.
On the real estate side, what we were really fortunate with was, we really started with industrial. And so we were able to get our teeth, cut our teeth into something where the cycle is a lot faster. The capital was, at the time, today it's very different, but the capital at the time was a lot lower. So the risk profile was simpler. And then we sort of graduated to doing a bunch of office. And so office brought another level of complexity and another level of sophistication. So I think that was another, great learning curve. And then residential is another level where, if you're doing a single tenant office building, you have one client and you're responding to that one client, where yes, there's, maybe 2,000 people that'll be occupying the building, but you have, in a residential project, you have 500 clients and individual clients, right? So, so I think we were fortunate where it was a nice natural evolution where, the foundation, the base was understanding the built form and how that goes about. And, we're really ground up developers. So we're not acquiring, we do it sometimes, but we're not acquiring existing buildings and repurposing. We're really, ground up builder and developers.
Sure.
So having that foundation and then, sort of graduating from the different asset classes and getting, to more and more complex, I think was a great, that is a great route.
That is a very articulate way of explaining it. We have traditionally only invested in industrial. we're starting to try to get into multi-res, but I can tell already the difference between the two, because you get a triple net lease for 10 years on industrial, and I don't want to say you don't do anything, but it's pretty low lift as far as effort goes. But the complexity, and we're doing very small multi-res compared to you, but I can tell already the complexity of the process is going to be way, way higher. So that's very interesting of how it sort of matured over time. And so as far as the family business, back to that, could you also talk to me about what are some of the challenges, that you've seen in family business? This is something we talk a lot about on this show is, there's a lot of strengths, as you said, that long-term vision, et cetera. I always think that with family, there's a certain, obviously, stickiness. You can, get into a huge fight with each other over something, but ultimately you're still family at the end of the day, which is important in business. You can have very truthful discussions. What are some of the challenges you've seen, getting through 3 generations?
Yeah, so there's no question we've had our, no shortage of challenges. I think one that's to be expected in life, that's to be expected in business. I think, what makes a family business different is, really the level of emotion that can come involved, right? Mm-hmm. And being of Italian descent, like passion is one of our strong values, right? And so we're very, very passionate.
Yeah.
So I think that's been our strength, but can also at time be the weakness, right? And I think that's it's how do you manage that? How do you balance that?
Yeah.
They say all the time in family business, it's a blessing and it's a curse.
Yeah, absolutely.
That statement is incredibly true, right? And I think there's because of that that passion, that emotion, I think that's what can make family businesses very different than other businesses, and you feel it, it's alive.
Yeah.
People can really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And get attached to it in a different way.
Yeah.
But at that same time, that emotion and that passion, can also create conflict and create challenges and all that kind of stuff. So it's...
What do you do to try to manage that? I know with my family, one of the things I've been trying to do more is ensure that we spend time outside of business, because it's crazy how you can end up by accident having business be the main reason you spend time together.
Yep.
And so we're now, I'm going away with my brother and his partner and my wife this weekend, and, trying to make sure we do stuff together that isn't centered around the business. It's actually just for the sake of getting to spend time together, which we love doing, but you can easily sort of lose track of that. So I'd love to hear sort of what have you guys found that helps mitigate that conflict or manage that?
Yeah, so I think, on that end, it's and you also go through different cycles, right? And when I look at where I am at with my kids and some of my other cousins and their kids, right, things can dramatically change, right? And,
sure.
And so growing up, that glue was my grandparents, and it was every Sunday. You'd be there every Sunday for lunch. In the summertime, be at the cottage, and there's no question they were the glue, right? And so as the family grows and expands, the grandparents are no longer around anymore, and now we're 9 cousins, and then those 9 cousins almost all have kids now.
Yeah.
So it's much harder. It's much more difficult to get folks together, right? And took a wonderful family business course at Northwestern Kellogg's.
I'm actually looking at doing that one.
Awesome.
I'll have to chat with you after this about that.
Yeah.
Me and my cousin are looking at doing it together.
Highly recommend it. I've been maybe for 3 or 4 different classes, and probably one of the founding fathers of family business, basically put that program together, John Ward.
Oh, cool.
So he's written, good 40, 50 books at least on family business. And, one of the things that he talked about was, how do you make sure to keep having the family to have fun, right? And build those interactions outside of the business. So we've been, the business has been extremely busy in the last number of years. And I think it's time for us to refocus on some of that, right? And to try to bring the family, closer together. And like I said, everyone's gone through the cycle now of having kids, and when you have kids that are, young kids, 1 and 4, it's, it's tough, right? And,
absolutely. You don't have a lot of time for other things. Oh, that's interesting. I think that's a good segue maybe into a bit more about your story. So you're the CEO now, but you've been in the business for much of your life. What is your earliest memory of the family business?
So earliest memory of the family business, I would say a couple of things that come to mind. One, just being, at the family cottage, it was my grandparents' cottage, and just watching my grandfather, do little things around the house. Always had a hammer, always had a nail, and always, he was, again, came from, an immigrant family. So like every little thing, like he wouldn't throw out a nail. It would,
absolutely,
be hammering it down and put it away in a jar and reuse it for another time. Right. So I think seeing my grandfather, in action, not in a really building way, but just, taking care of things. And then I get just being able to go to job sites, at an early age with my dad. No one in the family was ever pressured to say, oh yeah, you got to go into the business or whatnot, right? And but it was always around us. It was around us, and on the weekends we drive by and say, oh, look what we're building, and or walking on a job site and being there, and as a kid going to a job site where you got taken around on a dump truck or a bulldozer or stuff like that. Those were exciting times, and but in those moments, like, I had no clue that, this is what I wanted to do. Right. And it's funny, when I was a young teenager, I used to be obsessed with WWF, and I was like, nice. I want to be a wrestler. Right. not that I have the physique or whatever.
You never know. It's never too late.
Yeah. So that was like that when I was a teenager, like that's what I'm going to do. Right. And then, did a year of college, still wasn't sure, and at the time was working on the job sites, and so probably started on the job sites at 14, 15 years old, and just helping out, pushing a broom, picking up garbage and stuff like that, and getting exposure, and then it's sort of like, it just sort of happens, right? And and it's like, okay, I like this, and I like the environment. There's a nice in construction. There's a nice camaraderie between between the folks that are on the sites. A lot of passion. So it's like, oh, this is a fun environment, and can sort of see myself getting into it, and then career program in architectural technology, and
cool.
So really just understanding the built world and how things get put together. Wasn't sure if I wanted to go into architecture. I love architecture. Don't have the natural God-gifted talent of drawing things, but so ended up deciding going straight into work after, and worked on the job sites for another couple of years as an assistant site super, and then the rest was history. And today I get to still practice a little bit of that architecture, get to love working with our design department, and love focusing on some of the buildings that we work on. So it's been a fun ride. Really filled with just awesome people along the way, right? And I think that's what makes all the difference in life.
It's so interesting to hear how you got into the business, and there was no real pressure for you to do that. My dad was very similar, where he was careful that he really didn't want to force us to join it, because I think there's also so many examples you see of people that were forced. It really wasn't what they wanted to do. And then, obviously that turns out the way it does. But ironically, I was almost not encouraged to join to some degree, only from the point of view of he didn't want to force us. And my conversation I've had with him, and I've had with other family business members, is actually sort of what you went through, which is, I feel like being around it, you kind of fall in love with it. And I joined the family business when I was in my mid-20s, and I almost wish I had joined when I was in my teenage years, because there was like 10 years I missed of getting to work with my dad, learning all kinds of other elements of the business that, I learned later in life. But that's interesting. You were drawn to it yourself rather than being pushed into it.
Yes. And I think, we always say in YPO, our shared experience, right? And never give advice, but I 100% feel that exactly what you just described is that if I was elsewhere, I would not have gotten that same exposure. And I was also super fortunate when I came in. Like, we were a company of 50 employees, doing maybe $100 million of work. So in terms of being able to be around all of it and understand all the different corners of the business, like it was very, very easy.
Sure.
Like today we do $1 billion of work, 500
Wow.
employees, like it's a different animal, right? And so also, right place, right time. Like I was super, super fortunate to come in the time that I did, to be able to have that exposure where I was able to understand and see and, all the different corners of the business. So again, I can understand, maybe in a different setting, right? If you have 2,000 employees and all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
and it's harder to have that same, that same road, or path.
Yeah.
But I think in my particular case was, super blessed, and I would not change it for a second.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No, that makes a lot of sense. And was there a formal succession plan as you've moved into the CEO role? Because you took over from your dad, right?
Yes.
Was that, planned, or was it sort of it just happened naturally over time, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I think, there was no formal, plan in place. I think, things, were looked at, talked about, all that kind of stuff. But I think it was sort of a natural, a very, very natural progression. And again,
Sure.
Being able to start young and, work in a lot of the different areas of the business, I think it sort of became a natural path. It's obviously it's worked out. It's worked out well.
Yeah.
Dad and uncle still around, and so I mean they're still there, very involved. So at the end of the day, it's the team, right? It's all about the team, and
Of course.
yeah.
And is there any role in particular prior to taking the CEO position that you feel was critical to your development and understanding of the business? As you moved up through the ranks, is there a particular area of the business that you feel like was the most foundational to you being able to do your current role successfully?
I think, what was very foundational was when we set up our office in Ottawa. So it was myself and two other gentlemen that set up the office. So I was pretty young when we did it. So just, cutting my teeth into something different, not, we were pretty well known in Montreal, a known entity going into a new market. I think that was pretty transformational in terms of understanding, not just the day-to-day of, building a project, but understanding the business community, and how, a market interacts, how the market works. So I think that was a pretty big stepping stone for me for sure, in terms of just getting a better understanding and, a broader understanding.
Sure. And that accountability of it's really yours to own and be successful or not successful with. I found that's always so critical to my development is if you can hide a little bit, you don't really get the same learnings as when the buck stopped with me and I've made some big mistakes. The amount of psychoanalysis I've done afterwards of like the postmortem, what do I need to change, etc. I feel like that's been the most critical to my development is that accountability.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, the other thing that I think about all the time, and I was blessed when I went to Ottawa, I joined YPO. And so joined a forum there where, folks from all kinds of different businesses get together and on a monthly basis catch up, chat, and, really dive deep into what's going on in your life. And, you look at sort of personal, you look at family, you look at business. And, when you talk specifically on the business front, like, business is business.
Yeah.
It's all the same stuff, right? And at the end of the day, the majority of it is people challenges, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that's what I think keeps us up at night, and how to best navigate there. And your greatest successes and your greatest wins come from your best people, right? And probably your greatest challenges come from people that maybe not should be on the team and whatnot, right? And so that was a wonderful forum to again understand the intricacies of how different teams work and all that kind of stuff, right? And to know that you're dealing with all the same stuff, and everyone has the same problems.
Absolutely.
It's gives you a level of comfort and also gives you a level of confidence.
Yeah, big time. I joined my YPO forum in March 2020, so it was literally like we did our first one remote, COVID lockdown, and it was like thank God that happened because I got to hear from everybody else sort of their panic and everything like that too. So totally relate. So looking forward, I know that you are passionate about technology. You gave a really good seminar. Well, I think you do it every year now, but about, the future of industrial buildings. And I know there's a large technology component to it. When you look out at the horizon of what's in your innovation pipeline as a business, what are the projects that are most exciting to you that are coming up in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, so I think I get very passionate about that and get quite excited. I think, right now we're in, probably what you call the hype cycle, right? Yeah. Before it all really taking off, right? And especially in the last 12 months, there's been, when you think of ChatGPT and all the different things that come out of that, like it's incredible. I think same thing with robotics. Like there's so many, interesting opportunities that are out there, but I think right now we're at sort of the top of that cycle. And typically what happens from a technology perspective is that you hit that hype and then it goes down for a little bit.
Yep.
But then when it starts coming back, that's when really the
Dunning-Kruger curve. You go into the valley of despair, and then there's an actual realistic trend up.
Exactly. So one of the famous sayings that I love saying around this is that we're generally humans are generally too optimistic in terms of the timeline, in terms of when those things will happen, but we usually far underweigh the actual impact that it's going to have. And I'm a firm believer that I genuinely think humanity doesn't have a clue of what's coming.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think, my mindset is that I think there's, today, and we're having these conversations now, is like, how much do you invest in it now versus how much is it going to change in 12, 24, 36 months?
Absolutely. Especially with AI. I mean, like I'm very focused on AI as well. And it is progressing so quickly that it's difficult to even you'll see, somebody asked me recently, can you share some documents about sort of like, what are the best AI tools out there? And I was like, I looked at stuff that was 9 months old. It's almost irrelevant because there's so many new things coming out all the time. And that makes it really difficult to pick a winning racehorse, so to speak. Yep. But I wholeheartedly agree with you that it's like, this is going to have a giant impact. The question is, how and when do you really start to invest meaningfully? Because you don't want to be an early adopter and go in completely wrong direction, which I've seen happen too.
Yeah, so I think my attitude has always been that, very important to always dabble in a lot of it to really understand what is out there. I was with one of our board members this morning, and said one of the two key roles of a CEO is to always look out 5 years ahead. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years, right? And focus on your teams, right? And to the notion of where do you want to be in 5 years, and specifically from a tech perspective, I think it's so hard to forecast that because like ChatGPT just came out of nowhere, and it's this incredible tool, and they're saying that it's going to be maybe 100 times better next year.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty unfathomable in terms of 100%. What kind of change is there, right? So to say where we're going to be in 5 years, I think there's no question like AI is going to take over a lot of, what we know today in terms of jobs. It's going to augment some of the jobs, but I think it's going to have a pretty big impact in terms of, where the job market is. I think in 5 years, robotics will start having a significant play into, how the world operates. So I think those are pretty big things that are going to impact. And like I said, today, it's pretty hard to, jump in and say, okay, we're going to invest in this when very likely there's going to be another massive change or massive upgrade, in the next little bit. So I think it's, it's good to be sort of aware, understand, tinker with the tools, play with the tools, and then if there's something that could really make that, X factor in your business,
sure,
that, maybe others are not doing, then it's, be ready to sort of pounce on that and go when you can go, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. Sorry, just doing a quick time check. So I read recently that you are now looking to get into self-storage, and you're also looking to get back into multi-res rental, which I understand it's been a long time since your family was in that sector. Can you talk to me a bit about the motivation for, getting into some new verticals or some new asset classes?
Yeah, so I think, we're we constantly look at different opportunities, right? And at the end of the day, we want to stay very focused in terms of what we do, and really specifically our platform of invest, develop, and build. And so, self-storage came about, had someone that was with us that was in the business, and he was really pushing. He had left and was looking to start something up, and we said, hey, like, we had a great rapport with him and great relationship, and said, if you're going to start this up, like, we'd love to do it with you. And we definitely view it as an asset class that is something that we're probably lacking. And our thesis, originally was in Quebec, it's very underserved. In Canada in general, it's underserved, but Quebec specifically. So, we're starting it there now. We're doing a couple of deals. We have 3 deals that are underway.
Cool.
And looking to grow and scale that.
It's a beautiful business model I know it's complex, but the simplicity of when they're up and running. I mean, I don't know how many people you need to run one, but it can't be that many. I've always admired how simple but great of a business that is in self-storage.
Yeah, certainly from the operating side. I mean, it's versus having, 300 lockers or having 300 people living in there. It's certainly very different. We definitely see an opportunity there, and just capitalizing on all the great infrastructure that we have. So
sure.
It was a very, very easy extension of what we do. And the same thing on the multifamily front. Today, we've focused exclusively on condos. That market has been working really well for the last 20 years. That has dramatically changed in the last little bit. So really just looking to pivot. At the end of the day, from a delivery method, we're delivering almost exactly the same product, or 95% of the same product. We were talking before that, maybe it's a little bit different in terms of you really want to try to focus on maybe more longevity, where you have, tenants moving in and out. But other than that, it's pretty much, the same product. It's a different financial mechanism.
Of course. Financing works differently, et cetera. Yeah.
Financing, your equity, returns are different. But there's no question today there's a massive need, and from an affordability and from a supply perspective. And so really want to continue on that path. And right now the condo market is not working. I think that's going to take some time for it to actually come back, and I think rates are going to have to be stabilized for a certain period of time. I think the economy's got to be strong as well. So if that happens, maybe does it come back in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. But until people have that confidence in saying, I'm going to continue to reinvest, it's a challenging proposition, right? And I think the other challenge is that you layer on affordability onto that, right? And they're becoming more and more unaffordable, right? And there's no signs of prices really, going down and stuff like that. So it's almost hit a ceiling, right? Where renting is it's a different vehicle to to satisfy the home building business or industry. And there's no question, from a Canada perspective, we need to be delivering more and more housing units to offset all this immigration that's happening.
No, very well put. We're coming to the end of our time here. I had 2 last questions. First one was, is the next generation of your family now in the business? So your kids and your cousins' kids and stuff like that, have they started to work in the family business?
They have not. So they're all... it's hard to keep track now how many we are, but I think we're close to 20 of us in the 4th generation. Mine are the eldest, so my son's 12.
Okay.
So you got some time. It goes all the way down to newborn. So we definitely have some time. Again, I mean the business is very different than what it was. So obviously we want to have opportunity if they're interested to come in, and I think both of our stories, want to make them aware of it, but really want them to follow their passions and whatever they want to do, right? And ultimately, as a parent, and then even as an employer, we're there to support, their growth, right? And whether it's our actual kids, right, or anyone else coming into the business, like we just want to be, great at helping develop and build people in the business and help, turn them into great leaders and supporting the community.
So the door is open, though.
Door is open for sure.
Oh, awesome. Last question. So you've now done what many next generations and frankly parents that are entrepreneurs hope happen, which is a next generation family member has joined out of their own, decision making. They've worked in the business throughout their life and have ultimately taken over as the leader of the business. What advice do you have for families as far as, joining the business either as a next gen or trying to engage that next gen? What do you think is the best advice you could give?
Definitely a lot of thoughts are coming to my mind right now. I think it's a big responsibility. I think it's a responsibility that not to be taken lightly. And I think as you get into it, you understand that, you appreciate that, right? So it's a lot to put on the shoulders. Mm-hmm. But I think if you have, if you have the vision, if you have the care and the right intentions, it's a wonderful opportunity. And it's not easy. You got to be resilient. You got to have grit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of challenges, but I think it's, if you have a growth mindset, mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing. And to know that you're going to be hit with challenges at every single turn, at every corner. And you almost got to, like, I've come to the point where it's like almost like look forward to them now, because you got to embrace them. Right. And that's really what defines, success, is how do you rise to that challenge or to the next one, right? And how do you
Absolutely.
overcome it, right? And I think that's, to be able to have that grit, to be able to have that resilience, is super important. It's not, it's certainly not something for the faint of heart.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's not easy. It's hard work, but there's wonderful things that come with it. And, you get to work with great teams and connect with so many awesome people in the community. And, so
it must be cool getting to add to the next stage of your family's legacy too. Like, that must be a very fulfilling aspect, knowing that your kids and your cousins' kids will look up to you and your cousins the same way you probably did with your dad and his brothers.
Yeah,
I'm sure that must be very fulfilling too.
It's super, super fulfilling. There's no question. And one of our guys in the office says this all the time, is that this is, today it's bigger than all of us, right? And we want that same feeling, that same care for everyone that works with us, right? Pride is an important part of what we do, and you're able to to satisfy that by delivering great results and great experiences, right? And you do that, you get a great reputation, and that's sort of like the flywheel of of success, is that you keep on building upon that, right? And when everyone's a part of that, like that's and any key to a business is the success of the team, right? And the more and more you have the team involved, the more and more people are a part of that and feel that, right? And then
Absolutely.
continue to propel that forward. So there's no question, it's a wonderful feeling, and we want it to be as much of the team and the community that we're all part of it, right? It's a ton of collaboration in the world of development and construction, and so it's at the end of the day, we're fortunate we get to to physically touch and see the product that we get to work on, right? So it's a very rewarding from that perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. All right, sir. Watching. We put out new content every 2 weeks, so please like and subscribe. All right, take care.